Yo, what's going on, Geminites? It's your boy Gem Mint.
Milton the Manimal.
We're back with another character spotlight. This time we're going to do Who is Venom?
Yes, so, we're trying to kind of keep up with all the current Marvel movies and TV shows coming out, and characters that people might be a little confused about wanting to know leading into this stuff.
So we got the Venom movies coming out this October.
Yes.
And I know everybody knows who Venom is, so we're going to really talk about a lot of the stuff that maybe you're not clear on, tidbits or nuances about Venom that you might not be aware of.
Yeah, key character points, things to look out for going into this movie, things that really drove the character, and like Jem said, some of the side guys who wore the suit as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about some other hosts and some other iterations of the symbiote. Before getting into anything about Venom, I think we really have to discuss Spider-Man and the alien symbiote.
Of course.
So during Marvel's Secret Wars miniseries back in the 1980s, Spider-Man damages his regular outfit in battle, and he notices that Thor goes into a room with a damaged suit and comes out with a brand new suit.
Yeah, he basically goes to a vending machine,
like the tailor, the dry cleaner.
Yeah, presses a button and out falls the suit.
So Spider-Man wanders in there. He starts poking around with these futuristic machines, and then he sees this ball of black bluish goop. Right?
Yeah.
The suit comes on him, and it gives him the look as we know it today, the black with the white emblem. Now, during this time, he even says something to himself like, I must have had inspiration from Spider-Woman's new costume, because she has a very similar costume.
Right, and it's kind of crazy to think about. I wonder, was that their initial inspiration, and then obviously the story retconned itself a little bit.
Yeah, and it had to be. So that's when we understand where the alien symbiote came from. It first appeared actually in Amazing Spider-Man 252, where he just has it.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool cover. It looks like Amazing Fantasy 15. It's a cover swipe.
So one of the things to know about the symbiote suit as well is he no longer needed his web shooters at this point. He was able to generate his own webbing through the suit. It also increased his strength.
It increased his strength. He didn't need to have a web backpack of extra clothes anymore because it could mimic clothing. And I remember reading those first issues. He was like, "This is great." Yeah. And I'm like, "Damn, that is great."
So he's always naked, really. And he just has this Venom suit,
which is alive.
Symbiote, yeah.
So then the symbiote also does some other things. It starts kind of messing with his mind, and he get emo Spider-Man like Spider-Man 3 the movie,
where he's walking to these finger pointing girls on the sidewalk. Yeah,
you're trash, Brock.
You're trash, Brock.
He starts realizing that it's affecting his mind, it's making him more violent, so he tries to get it off him. Realizes it's not that easy.
When does he realize it's actually a live entity?
He realizes, I believe it's Reed Richards.
Okay.
When he takes it to the Baxter building.
Because he has some doubts about it, right?
Right, because it's messing with his mind, it's making him act out of the norm. So Reed Richards is the one that explains that it's a symbiote. He realizes that it's vulnerable to loud sounds, sonics, and fire. So to finally go and get it off, he goes to the church for the famous scene, the bell tower,
right,
to ring the bell, and the loud noise screams the symbiote off him.
So kind of a side note leading up before this, there was another character that was introduced named Eddie Brock. He's a reporter in a rival newspaper, and he was kind of following this career of a serial killer named Sin Eater. And he thought he was following it correct. He thought his leads were all good, but it turns out they weren't. And Peter Parker pretty much outed him, and this was kind of came because of Peter's aggression, because of the suit. He was kind of a little vindictive, kind of an asshole.
Right. And he thought he had the confession of the century, that Sin Eater confessed to these murders or what have you, and it ended up being a fake.
Right. So you had a guy whose life was ruined by Peter Parker.
So Peter Parker ruins his life. Eddie Brock happens to be in the same church, going into the church to
pray for guidance. Where do I go now? What do I do now?
And the symbiote comes off of Spider-Man, goes down onto Eddie Brock, and then he has the symbiote. Now, what's interesting about this is that Eddie Brock becomes Venom, right? He hates Spider-Man. He hates Peter Parker. The symbiote hates Spider-Man because he rejected him.
Right.
And Eddie Brock hates Peter Parker because he exposed Sin Eater. It's funny. They realize that they're one and the same. They kind of adapt Spider-Man's powers, and they know how to bypass his spider sense.
It's almost like a villain team-up in a way. You have two guys who have animosity towards him, and they come together and form like Voltron.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there's a cool scene where he's tormenting Spider-Man before you really see Venom, and there's a scene where you see his hand push Spider-Man into on the subway onto an oncoming train, and Spider-Man's spider sense doesn't catch it. And that's when he first is like freaked out, like how can somebody have pushed me and my spider sense not triggered it?
So something to know about Eddie Brock also is, prior to all this, he also has Olympic level agility and strength. He was an athlete. He was very in shape, a big bodybuilder kind of guy.
Right.
And so he has all those powers as well. He has an enhanced strength of Spider-Man, and he also has the ability to, like, the suit change, but he kind of does camouflage with it, which
right.
I don't think Spider-Man was doing before.
No, he wasn't. He uses the suit's abilities to go a step further, right?
Yeah.
And in Amazing Spider-Man 299, we get the first cameo of Venom, drawn by Todd McFarlane. And actually, Todd McFarlane's first Spider-Man work was the issue before, 298. And then in Amazing Spider-Man 300, we get the first full appearance of Venom. He's tormenting Peter Parker by coming to his house and scaring the shit out of Mary Jane. And he's basically one of Spider-Man's biggest foes at the time.
Yeah, because he's honestly one of the only ones who knows who Peter Parker is as well, right?
Well, he knows who Peter Parker is, and he knows he exploits Spider-Man's weaknesses because he can bypass that Spider sense. He goes to Aunt May's house and knocks on the door as Eddie Brock, and Peter is there, and he kind of just messing with him, letting him know that I can get you.
A lot of psychological warfare going on there.
So you have a lot of Spider-Man versus Venom in the 90s. He ends up coming back in Spider-Man 316, and that's another classic McFarlane cover where he's basically on top of Spider-Man, whooping him up.
And so going forward, I think Marvel kind of realizes, hey, look, we might have struck gold with this guy.
Crazy popular character. Crazy cool. I mean, to me, what was awesome? Like, he looked like Spider-Man, but he was built.
Yeah.
And then his mouth, man.
And the tongue. And the saliva and all that. And
So McFarlane originally drew the mouth thing, right? And I thought that was cool. And then I think later artists started kind of exaggerating the tongue even more. Larson was a big...
extended jaw.
Yeah, he was big with the extended jaw. I think what's important to touch on here before we move forward, one of the big mysteries kind of who created Venom, right? So Todd McFarlane was the artist, David Michelini was the writer, but the rumor has always been that it was a fan-created...
submission, right?
Right, submission that... to help come up with this villain, and that Marvel paid off this fan $200, and they ran with it. And I actually asked David Michelini this in person, which was probably kind of a dick move. But he just basically he didn't confirm or deny it. He was like, hey, I was the first one to write him.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
But it does seem that no one is able to say, I'm the creator of Venom. You don't see it anywhere.
He had it on his banner, right?
I don't think he had creator, though, did he?
Co-creator, maybe?
I can't remember.
He did, because that's why I asked him.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, yeah, but there's no, definitive creator of Venom. I mean, those were the first guys, first creative team to work on him, but, that's what rumor has it on who created Venom. Fan-created submission.
Marvel kind of going forward realized, like you said, they struck gold, right? And they're like, okay, how do we deepen this character, create more lore for it? And they go more into the symbiotes, and they start bringing in the spawn of the symbiotes. And that really starts going somewhere. And they also start making, okay... Keep in mind, Marvel's very kid-friendly and family-friendly. How do we make this guy an anti-hero?
Right. Well, I mean, it's kind of like what you always say. Hey, we have this really great villain.
Right.
What's the next best thing that we should do with him? Make him a hero.
Yeah, ruin him. But
so what really makes him a hero is his costume spawns another symbiote and bonds to Eddie Brock's cellmate, Cletus Cassidy. And
Cletus Cassidy is... a psychopath. He's a murderer, a mass murderer. I mean, this guy has no redeeming qualities at all.
In issue 361 of Amazing Spider-Man, Cletus Cassidy bonds with the symbiote permanently and becomes Carnage, and goes on a killing spree. It takes Spider-Man and Venom to team up, even though they hate each other, to take down Carnage. This was actually explored a little bit further down the line during the miniseries Maximum Carnage, which is probably... one of the bigger Marvel events at the time, right. Especially for Spider-Man fans.
This kind of also kickstarted this idea of... because Venom sees it as, the symbiote spawn wasn't evil. It was the person it bonded with. So the fact that he was so evil and so crazy, Cletus Cassidy, it polluted the symbiote.
Right. So
this is kind of also the first time you don't see it as, this alien organism. You actually see it as, a defenseless thing. It's an entity. It's a creature. And it's not it's not evil in nature necessarily.
They really touch on that a lot in the modern runs.
Oh, it's very heavily.
So the Maximum Carnage series was a huge success. There was video games on it, all sorts of media.
Animated series was very strongly influenced by that.
And the Spider-Man animated series. And then they decide to give Venom his own solo series, Lethal Protector, a 6-part miniseries, which is actually what the current movie is going to be loosely based off of. He decides to be a hero. New York's got too many heroes, so he goes to San Francisco, California to be a hero out there.
He basically makes a promise to Spider-Man, like, look, I'm going to change my ways. I'm not going to mess with you anymore. Let's have a deal. They kind of have an unspoken agreement. And Spider-Man's not super crazy about it. And when he sees Venom's out in San Francisco, he goes to investigate as well.
So this is where the Life Foundation comes in. And they're a government agency who's basically creating, test tube symbiotes?
Yeah, they're trying to create a security force. They want to heighten their own security for their different facilities. And they think these suits would be like a way to beef up their soldiers.
So then we get introduced into these 5 new symbiotes. Let's count them down. We got Riot,
Phage,
Agony,
Scream,
and Lasher.
But they don't get named in Lethal Protector at all.
I think they get named in Separation Anxiety,
okay,
which is another Venom miniseries. So you're reading the Venom Omnibus right now.
Yes.
Anyway, I wanted to mention these 5 symbiotes because rumor has it that these are going to be the villains of the Venom movie along with Carnage.
Right, so in terms, since we're talking about the movie, the main leader of the Life Foundation, Carlton Drake, is the main antagonist in this movie. And he's actually, they're kind of changing the lore a little bit. He's going to be the symbiote Riot.
Cool. So, and these are like good people that are just wearing these suits.
They're just soldiers. They're like regular people, yeah.
So that's throughout the 90s. Then we have a couple other Venom miniseries. They have like Dark Origin. They have Sinner Takes All. Then we start seeing other people get a hold of the Venom symbiote. I think the first one is it actually Eddie Brock's ex-wife for like one issue.
Yeah, Anne Wang.
And she becomes She-Venom, and that's no big deal. Then you have what's her name?
Angelo Fortunato. He's like a gangster, I think.
Yeah, I think he's like a mob guy. I don't know if he works for Hammerhead or Kingpin or something like but that's short-lived as well. The next main person to get it is Matt Gargan, the Scorpion.
My favorite Venom.
This is during the Avengers Dark Reign, where Norman Osborn is the leader of the Avengers. Well, not the leader. He's like the Fury of the Avengers.
It's post-Secret Invasion, and he's now the leader of S.H.I.E.L.D., is really what it is.
Of S.H.I.E.L.D.
And he switches it to Hammer.
Now, what I think is really cool about Matt Gargan, in public, he is Black Suit Spider-Man. And when he gets pissed off, he hulks out looking like Venom with the mouth and the tongue. But he covers it up. He cleans up nice for the public.
It's also interesting, too, because Matt Gargan, most people know him as Scorpion. And as Scorpion, he was a bad guy, but he wasn't like a psychopath. But the way he's represented as Venom is almost very Carnage-esque. He's very like a psychopath and like a killer, and that's really how he's been written going forward since that time.
Well, he's never been the brightest.
No,
and I think he had a couple knocks in the head from Spider-Man as Scorpion over the years.
I'm sure.
After that, we get our boy Flash Thompson, Peter Parker's high school bully, but Spider-Man's biggest fan. He actually gets both of his legs amputated below the knee.
He's a war veteran,
right? He's a vet. Through the government, right? He becomes Agent Venom, and they basically sedate the Venom symbiote. I think Remender's run in the beginning, he can be Venom for like 48 hours, but if he doesn't come back and get the medicine or doesn't get sedated, then he'll lash out as Venom.
Yeah, so they do a lot of drugs to kind of keep it calm and whatnot. And this is actually the era where they really dive into
the
Clintar and this modern history of the Venom suit, the alien race, the Clintar.
Which is the alien symbiote. Then we end up learning that, which is a great run, that Remender run.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Then we end up learning that really Venom is just crazy because the symbiote is sick.
Yeah, and they also talk a lot about how these Clintars have, if you will, I don't think it really is the same anymore in modern Venom stuff, but they say that the Clintar is supposed to bond with one and one only, like a one life partner. And they explain that during this run that it's actually Flash Thompson, and that's why he's able to do well, and that Eddie was a problem. But it doesn't seem like that's really kept.
Yeah, because now in the current runs,
we're back to Eddie.
Well, in the current run of Venom, we get a new guy, Lee Price, that gets the symbiote, and he is a psychopath as well.
Yeah, he's a gangster.
Yeah,
too.
he's not a psychopath. He's really just this badass gangster, heartless kind of guy. The symbiote is very vulnerable these days and very.
What did you call it? Like an abused?
That's how it comes off, and I don't want to offend anybody, but he comes off. It comes off weak and scared, and Price takes advantage of that, and he doesn't care. And actually, prior to this, because Eddie Brock doesn't have the symbiote anymore, he actually gets diagnosed with cancer, and he's working. I believe he's working at Mr. Negative's food shelter,
right?
Which Mr. Negative he's another lead.
So Eddie Brock really falls on hard times for a while. He's dying of cancer. He doesn't have the symbiote. He wants it back. It doesn't want to go back to him. He wants it.
It looks at him like he's weak now.
Yeah, and of course, as everything is, it's very cyclical in Marvel, and they have to always go back to the original.
Eddie Brock's white blood cells still have traces of the symbiote in it, and when he's in contact with Mr. Lee, Mr. Negative, they have a negative reaction and become the opposite of the Venom symbiote, and he becomes Anti-Venom. As Anti-Venom, he has the all-white costume with the black spider, and he has the power to cure any radioactivity that he comes in contact with.
Yeah, and basically kill any symbiotes.
Or if he comes in contact with Spider-Man and gets near him, he starts to cure Spider-Man, and Spider-Man starts losing his powers.
And then Eddie kind of turns into like this weird kind of like missionary guy where he's like, it's his mission from God to go do these things, get rid of the symbiotes.
He's a healer.
Yeah, he's a healer. It's really strange.
Anyway, so after the gangster
Lee
Price has the symbiote, Eddie Brock gets the symbiote back. You got to remember, at this point, Eddie Brock and Flash Thompson are both without the symbiote. They actually give the Anti-Venom symbiote to Flash Thompson. Then Eddie Brock, he's strong, he's cured of cancer. He bonds back with the original symbiote, and he's currently Venom right now. Today.
Right. And so what we have going forward now in the current Venom, there's a new Venom storyline written by Donny Cates, and it's really retconning this whole origin of the Venom symbiote. There's going to be a little bit of spoilers here if you're not totally caught up with the Venom issues, but what we find out that is the first time the symbiote came to Earth wasn't with Spider-Man. Actually, it had been in Earth before. It bonded with some Vietnam vets, and there were some soldiers that were using it during Vietnam.
I have one problem with the symbiote backstory. Like, back in the 90s, they had an event called Planet of the Symbiotes. And Spider-Man travels to the symbiote's home world. But all the symbiotes look like goo, like kind of like when you put a sheet on and you want to look like a ghost, right? But they have Spider-Man-type eyes. And I always kind of was bothered by that because, to me, the symbiote only had those eyes when he bonded with Spider-Man and kind of adopted his costume or Spider-Woman's costume. But then all those symbiotes had those kind of eyes on the planet, and that kind of bugged me.
So also what we have introduced lately is this god of the symbiotes. And in the most recent issue of Venom, Venom 4, this god is basically telling his story to Eddie Brock as he's got him pinned down. And he's explaining that he's a god who's been around forever. He represents the darkness, and his whole goal is to get rid of the light. He creates a sword, and while he's creating the sword, he bonds it with a part of himself. And where we get the Venom weaknesses of fire and sound comes from him hammering the sword on an anvil. The heat of the fire and the ringing of the hammer is like, kind of goes down the line in the symbiotes and becomes like their weakness. So you find out that back in the past, he's had some run-in with Thor, and he eventually at one point was cut off. He had like a hive mind with this Clintar, and he was cut off from him due to Thor like beating him back in the Middle Ages. And he gets imprisoned, and Clintar is actually the planet, a prison for him. And the Clintar species is now cut off from him, and they don't want him to kind of come back to power.
Man, see, I'm not even caught up on this, but it sounds like they're giving it a lot of backstory.
A lot of backstory. Basically, like, telling you where it's all comes from. So,
I think the only other thing we can kind of touch on is the Ultimate Universe Venom. So, in Ultimate Spider-Man, Peter Parker's father works with Eddie Brock's father. They're scientists. And they basically create the symbiote in a lab. It's not an alien or anything like that. So the symbiote bonds with Eddie, and they're like high school friends. And it becomes a high school kind of rivalry plus a superhero battle.
Yeah, I think it's like they work together because they find that they meet each other because their fathers were friends. And they become really close, which is an interesting dynamic.
Right.
And I can't remember what really is the breaking point. I think it's the Venom suit.
Yeah, Venom's gallivanting around town. Spider-Man has to stop him. Right. Eddie Brock feels like, Spider-Man or Peter Parker is jealous of him.
Right.
And he's like a really beast, hulking kind of Venom, that one.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring that up because the new Venom movie that's coming out, it looks like it may borrow some elements from the Ultimate Universe Spider-Man. I doubt they're going to go alien with the symbiote. It'll probably be lab-created. Although, it's not going to have ties to the MCU or...
So, did we talk about it all when... Because it seems like the movie is heavy on this. And this is actually one of the interesting aspects of the Venom symbiote to me is... When did it really start that they communicated back and forth with each other?
Yeah, right away.
Spider-Man didn't, did he?
No, that's an interesting dynamic. Spider-Man never talked to the symbiote. It's almost like it was dormant, but I think that's because he didn't bond with it. Mm-hmm. Eddie bonds with the symbiote. And right away, in those early Spider-Man, I think it's even Spider-Man 300, he's pumping iron, and he's saying, hey, I need to do this to be strong. You don't need that. You're already strong.
Yeah, and in Lethal Protector, whenever he's Venom, or actually even when he's Eddie Brock, he always says, we are here to help. We. He always uses we as the term.
Because it's always him and the symbiote.
So it's very interesting dynamic between the two.
So I hope this helped answer a lot of unanswered questions about Venom. I know everybody knows he's the Spider-Man villain with the big mouth and the tongue, but hopefully this gives you some more insight on the character. We got the movie coming out soon. We saw one trailer, and we're getting rumors of the San Diego Comic-Con trailer where I guess it's pretty violent, pretty rated R.
Yeah.
It's a rated R movie, right?
Not sure.
Oh, but yeah, I guess he bites someone's head off.
I hope so.
But there's also rumors that he's not going to have the spider emblem on his chest.
Right, yeah, they pretty much said that the suit is just going to have streaks of white to kind of show that somewhat.
Not feeling that. But anyway, hit us with a comment. What do you think about Venom? Anything that we missed? I'm sure we missed stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not know-it-alls, but we know a little something. Hit the like on the way out. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more for more character spotlights. And y'all stay minty fresh.
Peace.
Peace.